Saluti a tutti, and welcome to this episode of Ciao DMV, Italian American Life in the DMV. My name is Joseph Barone, and I will be your host. This podcast channel is dedicated to all things Italian and Italian American in the DMV, aka DC, Maryland, and Virginia. My focus is on the Italian American experience, from family stories to little-known history to businesses and to cultural events. Today, I am pleased to speak with Anthony Solazzo, who is the managing partner of Mason Borough Partners. According to the website, the firm focuses on placing driven and highly skilled individuals in engaging, upward-moving positions at the leading sales, marketing, IT, and finance organizations of tomorrow. The firm primarily works with private equity, venture capital-backed, and self-financed software enterprises to serve their recruitment needs. He is also an angel investor. So, Anthony, thank you and welcome to Ciao DMV.
Thank you, Joseph.
So why don't we begin with the most basic question that I ask everyone is, where were you born and where did you grow up?
Born at Holy Cross Hospital in Silver Spring, Maryland, and grew up in a town in Silver Spring called Calverton.
Okay. And now Holy Cross is actually in my backyard. It's only about a mile or so from where I live, so I'm very familiar with the area. And where is your family from in Italy?
Yeah, both my late father, Sabino Solazzo, and my living mother, Serafina Solazzo, were born in about a 5,000-person town in Italy called Bisaccia, which is part of the Avellino Campania region of Italy in southern Italy.
Okay. And in growing up, did they speak Italian at home? Did they speak some Italian? Did they primarily speak English? What did they speak?
Yeah, so the first language I learned in the household was Italian, and when I went to kindergarten, the funny part about it was a kindergarten teacher, said to my parents, "Hey, you need to start speaking English to Anthony. He's going to have problems, learning the English language because English wasn't my first language." So, as scared immigrants as they were, they started speaking to me more in English, which obviously they spoke English, but their first languages were Italian. So, but yes, it was spoken in the home.
Okay. And was it more the dialect, or was it kind of the more proper Italian?
Yeah, good question. So it was what we call Bizaccesi. So, people of the land here. We're Torrenos from Bisaccia. So yes, definitely a dialect.
Okay. And so, do you keep in touch with any of the relatives in Italy?
We do. My kids have been there. I've been there, several times. When we were younger, we came from a household of, two parents working, and my father's first cousins and my second cousins would come over for, study abroad type of, events at colleges like Georgetown and GW, and they would stay with us, and we would also kind of be their tour guides during the day and get on the metro and take them to the White House, take them to, all of the attractions here in the DC area. So yes, very, very much so.
Okay. Well, that's good. I know a lot of people do, but a lot of people don't. In fact, a lot of people don't even know where their family comes from in Italy. So I think that's really great that you keep in touch with them. Thinking back to the early days growing up in Calverton, what are 2 or 3 key values that you grew up with and that you've taken into adult life?
Yeah, so I think what's, in growing up, in the Solazzo household, my mother and father, I think, a really strong work ethic and high value on, family first within, the environment. So, and having, great friends and doing what you say you're going to do to develop a high level of trust with your family and certainly your friends. But those are kind of the 2 main things.
Okay. And if you don't mind me asking, is your spouse, is your wife Italian, or is she?
Yeah, so Andrea is from Youngstown, Ohio,
Okay.
a little town called Borman, and she is half Slovak and half Italian.
Okay. And I know the Youngstown area has a huge number of Italians. That whole area, Columbus through Youngstown, huge number of Italian and Italian Americans who live there. Let's move on a little bit. Where did you go to high school?
I went to DeMatha Catholic High School in Hyattsville, Maryland.
Okay. And did you play any sports or any clubs?
Yeah, so I was a cross-country runner and a soccer player
Okay.
in high school.
Cool. Okay, so you went to college, and where did you go to college?
Mount St. Mary's College, then, now University in Emmitsburg, Maryland.
It's a very nice, very beautiful place. There's a huge seminary there still.
It is, yeah.
But after you graduated from college, you decided to go into the financial sector. And so I'd like you to maybe talk a little bit about the work in that area and what were eventually one or two of the top lessons that you learned from that experience.
Sure. So graduating from Mount St. Mary's College, I matriculated over to CFI, Corporate Finance Institute, which, was a precursor to what I would call a modern day accelerator. I got the job because one of Mount St. Mary's friends of mine who was older than me got me the interview, and I really wanted to get into the seed stage venture capital angel investing world, and that was my best opportunity at the time. Upon graduation, I actually accepted a job with T. Rowe Price to do net asset valuing for their mutual funds in Baltimore, but I had to renege on that opportunity because I wanted to be in a sector like the venture capital industry, and CFI was the best one that I had at the time. So we were working with pre-revenue, early stage companies and people that were cut across every vertical you can think of, and we were investing out of our small micro funds of about $30,000 in each company, and most of them failed. A handful of them got sold, and what I learned in the 7 years while I was there is that all people are created equally, but in their ability to execute was not equal. So I always thought it was a talent issue, also luck, and also right timing in the markets. So, but that's what allowed me to think through what was I going to do next as a career move, and at that time, I loved recruiting, wasn't able to monetize recruiting skills working at a small seed stage venture capital firm. And then, somebody I grew up with told me to, talk to a brother who was in the recruiting industry, and we stayed in touch. And he started his own firm called Mason Burrow Partners, at the time. And a year later, I joined him strategically to build out, my practice in the executive search space.
So how long have you been with Mason Burrow?
Going on, 19 plus years now.
Okay, so tell us a little bit more about the business. I gave you the introduction from the web. I gave everyone the
Sure.
introduction from the website, but that really covers some things. But tell us a little bit more about Mason Burrow.
Sure.
What do you intend to do? What do you try to do?
Sure.
What's your strong points? Those sorts of things.
Sure. So the founder of Mason Burrow Partner was a guy named Danny Gillis, who's a dear friend of mine. He taught me the business, and 5 years into the business, he decided to move on and go run a company that he had invested in. So I took over the business and built it out the way that I wanted to build it out. We're now today a 5-person firm that's boutique. And when I started, I would focus in on the financial services vertical, placing front, middle, and back office executives within hedge funds like D. Shaw, SAC Capital, Marathon Fund, and doing a lot of CFO and controller placements for early stage venture capital backed software companies. Did that for 5 years or so, and realized that wasn't a really good annuity to do multiple placements within one company. So about 13 to 14 years ago, I decided to make a change to the business to have it highly focused on placing sales, marketing, and customer success talent into zero revenue to about $100 million revenue businesses that were focused on hiring sales, marketing, and customer success talent at every level. And that's about 90% of our searches. And that was a strategic reason to do that was because there was going to be multiple placements into one company versus, most companies will only have one controller and one CFO. So that is what we're focused in on today. The other 10% of our business is focused on placing HR, operations, engineering talent, but we're really known for go-to-market talent at the entry level all the way up to the executive level.
So without giving away any trade secrets, how do you find talent? How do
Sure.
you find these people for placement?
Sure. So there's really three ways, right? Past candidates that we've placed are a great source of referrals. LinkedIn, we're power users in the LinkedIn platform, and past customers that we've worked with from a company standpoint know what we do, and that's how we find our candidates that we place and the companies that we place them for. So I kind of equate it into three buckets. We gather candidates, we sort and lead score them, and then we present them for interviews to our customers.
And approximately how many successful placements, if you want to call it that, do you have per year?
Sure. So we're anywhere between 35 to 55 placements in any given year.
Okay. Now, thinking about the business, you've been in the business now 19 years, and although the focus may have changed within the company a little bit on placements, the business has changed over those 19 years. So thinking back, what are some of the big changes that you've seen and challenges that you've seen over those last 19, almost 20 years? Because I can imagine the business has changed quite a bit.
Yeah. So the biggest changes in the industry are that with the advent of the internet and the transparency of knowing what all of the candidates that we're talking to, what their backgrounds are today is very transparent because people keep up their LinkedIn profiles as if their resume is kind of up to date. So a placeholder for their resume, if it's not updated, is a LinkedIn profile. So that is the biggest change, in the market. Now, 20 to 25 years ago, and even further back, folks that were in the industry would have to trade sales, marketing, and customer success lists amongst recruiters. For example, the Oracle sales list versus the HP sales list versus the Google sales list, and recruiters would swap those out because everybody has different jobs, and they would be calling them on different jobs, and the internet wasn't around. So those are the biggest changes: people's backgrounds and transparency, and knowing what their focus area is. So time to placement has become much quicker because we're not going to call on somebody that has a background in manufacturing if we're trying to place somebody that has a cybersecurity background in a startup.
Since things have become much more transparent, do you find that people still lie on their LinkedIn profile, don't really quite tell the whole truth? I mean, I think years ago it was probably easier since there was more of a paper trail as opposed to electronic. But do you find that happening now?
We find that happening more in the technical roles, with the advent of sophisticated AI language learning models. So when the rubber hits the road as it relates to technical engineering searches, the candidates get sussed out pretty quickly on what their skills are as it relates to hardcore technical coding. So we see a lot more. I would call fraud in that space of engineering. On the sales and marketing and customer success side, 50% of their interview is the metrics and the performance they've had hitting against the quota and metrics, and the other 50% is culturally fitting in with the company that they're interviewing with.
You mentioned AI. How do you think AI is going to affect your business? Not just simply today, but next 4 or 5 years down the road?
Yeah, good question. So seeing it now, a lot of automation is taking place in the pre-screening and screening side of the recruiting industry. Avatars will and virtual assistants will be doing a lot of the things that we collect information on before presenting a candidate. That's happening right now. I don't think robots yet are selling software or AI tools, but that is coming for sure. But the main thing is kind of the automation of rudimentary tasks and skills that recruiters spend a lot of time doing is occurring now and will continue to occur in the future. So there's definitely disruption occurring. But with that said, metrics haven't changed in the last 20 years. People finding their next opportunity, the metrics are 80% of somebody referring a known entity to a company. The other 20%, I would argue, is and there's data to back this up, applying directly to the company via their website, and or working with the recruiter. So the odds are still against us. They always have been against us. But if you're looking for a specific candidate from a specific competitor, companies have a lot of incentives to use recruiters.
Are there any other changes you may see coming down in the market for your particular area of business, other than AI?
Not that I'm not aware of.
Okay.
Now.
Okay. So let's move on and talk about the other thing that you do, which is that you are an angel investor. So for our listeners, can you explain what an angel investor is?
Sure. So an angel investor is a person that writes any given amount of money, small or large, into sometimes a pre-revenue, revenue-based growth stage company, cut across really any vertical you can think of. It could be a services company, it could be an AI company, it could be a software company. It allows the founder of that company to use those funds to build their business in the specific category of company that they're trying to build. So that's what an angel investor is.
So how does this all work in the sense of does a person, let's say I have a company, I have an idea for a startup, maybe manufacturing, maybe service. Do I come out to you? Do I make a pitch like you sometimes see on Shark Tank, on those sorts of things? Do you find them? How does that whole process work in making the match between you and the business?
Sure. So a lot of the angel investors spend their time investing in software and services companies. I've done over 70 investments, maybe more than that, including some of the venture funds that I'm an investor in. Once you're kind of active in the space, everybody has an opportunity to kind of show you. So it's kind of a network of folks that you're on the cap table with, that you kind of raise your hand and say, hey, I want to see more opportunities because I'm actively investing in the business. So a lot of companies aren't cut out for venture capital and or angel investments. A lot of founders will max out their credit cards, go to a bank if they can to get some kind of SBA loan or some kind of loan to build their construction business or their manufacturing business. But it's pretty well established community where there's endless of opportunities to be an angel investor in the business. It comes with high risk at the earliest stages, and I do it strategically, Joseph, because my recruiting business is basically unsellable, right? It's worth 30% of whatever I bill in a given year. So I look at if I get disrupted in recruiting from artificial intelligence and or language learning models or avatars, I will have a contingency plan with some hopefully companies working out over a given period of time, so I can kind of retire and do the things that I want to do kind of in retirement. So it's really a means to an end, and it's really a hedge. Over the last, 13 years that I've been investing, and 19 years running, my boutique search firm.
So you've mentioned that you've probably invested in about 70 different companies, maybe a little more than that. Thinking back on those 70 companies, any successes? Anyone that you can say, yes, oh man, I made the right call on this one. This is it.
Sure. So we've had 13 to 14 exits. I think about 12 failures, and the rest are still alive to my knowledge. So I'm really excited about my portfolio. And where I get the most excited is a lot of it is obviously have to do with timing, luck, and being at the right place at the right time. And the people that I like to kind of align with are sales minded founders that want to sell a product or service and get some kind of benefit in return for that service or product. People that do what they say they're going to do, people that are going to be transparent, people that are going to have good corporate governance around their company and not tell you when things are going just great, but also tell you when things are so-so and or when things are going really badly. So we're firm believers in just being overly transparent and overly communicative. And I've seen really good updates on a quarterly basis and monthly basis, and I've seen some entrepreneurs that think it's a nuisance to update their angel investors. And I've always said that whether you're taking, $1 from somebody or you're taking $50,000 from somebody, you have signed up to over communicate with your family, friends, angel investors, and everybody that's on their cap table, because they have a right to know what's going on with the company. Maybe not every month, but certainly at a minimum quarterly update.
So if I was to come to you and say, hey, I'd like you to, you've heard about my company, I want to invest. The things that you're looking for, one, someone who has good communication skills, is willing to communicate with you about the business at least every quarter. Second, good governance rules on the company. Anything else that you're looking for in particular?
Somebody that has, a subject matter expertise, not necessary but helpful, trying to solve a real problem in the market that they've may have worked in the last 5, 10, 15 to 20 years. So we see a lot of pattern recognition around that. And most importantly, knowing that people are going to try to do what they say they're going to do and best efforts, and working on their company 100% of the time, because I believe if you do things part of the time you get part-time results. You do things 100% of the time you get better results. Doesn't guarantee success, but gives you an opportunity to have some kind of success with your business.
Now, everyone likes to talk about the successes. However, there's also the failures that come about with this. Has there been any, without naming any particular names, and maybe you can talk a little bit about the industry, has there been any investment that you've made and you said, I'm really not too sure about this, but I'm going to invest anyway, and you didn't listen to your gut, but you went out anyway and just said, this has just been a disaster. Has there been anything like that?
Yeah, there's been several for sure. Going against your gut, going against my gut has occurred for sure. You end up finding out that, for example, without naming, companies, that the person worked on the company for a year and then decided to shut it down when things got really tough, and they had a board and they weren't able to be self-aware on what they're really good at and what they really stink at. That's another trait that I look at that I think should be on everybody's resume. If you ask me what I'm incredibly good at versus what I stink at, I can tell you one thing that I'm good at and I stink at a lot of other things. And I think self-awareness is a big thing for entrepreneurs. They don't need to be the smartest person in the room. They have to have the ability to learn anything and get the answers from their advisors, from their board, from their investors, and certainly also from their customers.
Okay. So I'm going to kind of wrap this up now, but if someone wants to get a hold of you, maybe they're interested in using your services on the recruitment end. Maybe they're interested in saying, hey, I've got this company, I've got this product. What's the best way to get a hold of you to do this?
Oh, sure. Just sending me an email at anthony@masonboroughpartners.com, and or sending me a text that you can see from my website at masonboroughpartners.com.
Great. Anthony, thank you so much for being part of my Ciao DMV episode today. I cannot thank you enough for taking time out of your busy schedule.
Thank you, Joseph, for making the time. It's been a pleasure.
And for our listeners, if you're interested in being on this podcast, please feel free to contact me at ciaodmv@gmail.com. And please remember, if you enjoyed listening to this episode, please take a moment to like, comment, subscribe, and or share with a friend. This is Joseph Barone, your host, signing out. Ciao for now.